Can I welcome the Honourable Lady to her place and join with her in her comments about her former private office secretary? I think the Honourable Lady needs to read the deal that was reached by this government. The £1.25 billion transformation project at Port Talbot will deliver a state-of-the-art electric furnace, the contract for which has just been signed, in just under 10 weeks without providing any additional funding beyond the £500 million previously announced. We delivered a better deal. It secures the immediate future of Port Talbot, lays the foundations for future investment and enhanced protections for the workforce in Port Talbot, Llanwern, Trostre and Shotton.
Delighted the Honourable Lady read the deal that we wrote, but the facts are simple. Despite the protesting, Mr Speaker, this is the same deal as previously negotiated by the last Conservative government, involving the same amount of money to build on the electric arc furnace, the same cash for that transition board. It's ludicrous, frankly, for her or others to continue to claim there was no support in place and that it somehow appeared that she found it down the back of the sofa. She's fully aware the cash had been sitting there the whole time. Perhaps an apology is needed. Also, too, for claiming that Port Talbot supplies the defence industry also with materials.
I have to say, Mr Speaker, I think if an apology is due, it's due to the people of Port Talbot for promising £80 million for a transition board that operated, I think, for 9 months under the previous Secretary of State for Wales and delivered not a single penny to the people of Port Talbot. And now we know why, because the £80 million didn't exist.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson David Chabot.
The closure of the last blast furnace in Port Talbot has resulted in the loss of several thousand highly skilled jobs across South Wales, prompting another economic contraction across our region. The Global Centre for Rail Excellence at Oncloyne is one project that could reverse this trend of deindustrialisation and bring back good, well-paid jobs to South Wales. So will the Secretary of State confirm that the UK Government intends to make further investments towards this project and update us as to what conversations she's had to ensure that this project gets going?
Can I thank the honourable gentleman for his question? He will know from both the budget and the International Investment Summit that there are significant investments being made into Wales as a result of the work of this government. £63 billion announced at the Investment Summit, £1 billion to go into Shotton Mill in North Wales, the biggest investment in Wales, I think, for decades, and that will secure 300 jobs. It also means we will have the largest UK paper manufacture site in the whole of the United Kingdom. So we are growing the economy, creating jobs and delivering significant investment, and I'll certainly write to him about the rail project.
Tony Antoniazzi.
Question number 2, Mr Speaker.
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. With your permission, I'll answer questions 2 and 3 together. We have reset our relationship with the Welsh Government. Our approach is based on trust and mutual respect and is spearheaded by the new Council of the Nations and Regions, which met for the first time last month. My regular meetings with the First Minister of Wales are also driving forward our new partnership, which is already delivering for Wales, and this was evident in the biggest ever real terms budget settlement delivered for the Welsh Government last week.
I'd like to thank the Secretary of State for her response, and she has been clear that this Labour Government will build a new partnership with the Welsh Government based on cooperation, respect and delivery. Can she say how the Government will give meaning to the manifesto commitment to strengthen devolution?
Mr Speaker, the previous Conservative government ran roughshod over the devolution settlement, including by legislating in devolved areas without consent on numerous occasions. This government will respect the devolution settlement and work in partnership with all devolved governments. We will honour our manifesto commitment to do this by strengthening the Sewell Convention, including a new memorandum of understanding between our governments, ensuring that the petty squabbles of the past are confined to history and we can focus on delivering for the people of Wales.
Mark Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Secretary of State has been very clear about the much-needed reset between the Welsh and UK governments. Can she also make clear how the recent budget has contributed to this reset?
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Our budget delivered for Wales for the first time in a generation because a £21 billion settlement announced last week is the largest settlement in real terms since the dawn of devolution. It will provide a record boost for the Welsh Government to support vital public services in Wales like the NHS. It includes £25 million to maintain the work to keep coal tips safe, as well as £320 million for investment zones in North Wales and South Wales to power our sector strengths like creative industries, life sciences and advanced manufacturing, such as our world-leading compound semiconductor cluster. This shows the difference to Labour governments working together.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. First of all, may I pay tribute to my friend who's just taken on the role of Shadow Secretary of State for Wales. A fantastic opportunity for her to champion a vital part of our union. But may I ask the Secretary of State, who's newly in her place, what is she going to do to make sure that the power that brings our union together comes out of Ynys Môn, that's Anglesey to her, so that she is able to make sure that the nuclear projects that keep us safe are actually properly invested in and not dropped as they have been by this Labour government? They control both.
I wonder whether the Right Honourable Gentleman has ever been to Anglesey, or Ynys Môn, as he describes it. I'm very eager to see new nuclear developments in North Wales, which will provide high-quality jobs across the region and drive economic growth. We recognise a nuclear future at Wilver could help deliver several of our strategic objectives, achieving net zero, energy independence and restoring economic prosperity across our nations and regions. Great British Nuclear completed the purchase of the site in June 2024, and we will make future announcements about it very soon.
Jim Allister.
Could the Secretary of State explain how you strengthen the union while maintaining a petitioning border in the Irish Sea at the behest of a foreign jurisdiction and under its laws?
Secretary of State.
I'd refer the Honourable Gentleman to my previous answer about the resetting of the relationship with Welsh Government, working together, respecting the devolution settlement with all devolved governments.
Liz Savile-Roberts.
The Secretary of State talks about respecting the devolution settlement. Mark Drakeford wrote to the Chancellor ahead of the budget asking for a review of Wales's Barnett formula for transport funding, which had fallen from 81% in 2015 to 36% in 2021. But the budget revealed a further cut in Welsh transport comparability factor, now down to 33%. How come strengthening the union under Labour means that every major rail project in England results in Wales losing out?
We are having ongoing discussions, Mr Speaker, with the Welsh Government about funding flexibilities and their fiscal framework. We will deliver our manifesto commitment to work with the Welsh Government to address the outdated fiscal framework. Heavy rail infrastructure, as she knows, is not devolved in Wales like it is in Scotland and Northern Ireland, and the Department for Transport settlement provides £1.1 billion cash increase to total budgets in 2025-2026 compared to 2024-2025.
Glynos Meddy.
Question number 4.
Secretary of State.
I have regular discussions with the First Minister of Wales on a range of topics, including, of course, the autumn budget. This budget has delivered for Wales for the first time in a generation. The Welsh Government are receiving the largest settlement in real terms since devolution to support public services like the NHS. And over 100,000 workers in Wales benefit from increases to the national minimum wage and national living wage each year.
I'll try and squeeze it out.
The Barnett form announced that the budget announced that the Barnett formula would apply to funding for agricultural, rather than the devolved governments receiving a ring-fence amount. The Farmers Union of Wales say Barnettisation of funding could lead to a cut of £146 million per year, a cut of over 40%. Can the Secretary of State say if the figure is correct, and whether she believes that her government's budget has showed any consideration at all to our farming communities?
Secretary of State.
I was very pleased, Mr Speaker, that the budget was able to protect the current farming budget for the next financial year, despite Despite the difficult decisions we had to make because of the party's opposite trashing of the economy.
Mr Griffiths, you're continuously always being a nuisance on the front bench. Please, I want you to either restrict it or go and get yourself that cup of tea. Secretary of State.
Mr Speaker, thank you. I was pleased that the budget was able to protect the current farming budget for the next financial year, despite the difficult decisions that we had to make. Obviously, farming is devolved in Wales. The decision of Welsh Government as to how to spend that budget will be up to them.
Catherine Fuchs.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I welcome last week's budget announcements regarding improving rail transport. And I want to bang the drum for a most excellent project in Monmouthshire, the Magor Walkway Station. It's ready for investment. In fact, you may even call it oven ready. Will my right honourable friends commit to working with me, the Rail Minister and Welsh Ministers to deliver the 5 Burn stations? And will she meet with me to discuss progress?
My honourable friend is a wonderful advocate for her constituency and for the Burns Commission recommendations for her constituency, and I'd be very happy to meet her to discuss it.
Show Secretary of State Mince Davies.
Will the Secretary of State express her regret to the House for the Labour budget's impact on Wales, which undoubtedly will make the people of Wales poorer, pensioners left wondering whether they should turn their heating on this winter, destroying family farms and affecting business confidence and employment across the nation?
The biggest ever settlement in real terms since the dawn of devolution. £80 million protected for steel workers and businesses, £88 million for city and growth deals, £320 million for funding through investment zones, £25 million for coal tips, £440 million protected for local communities. I could go on. I think it was a great deal for Wales.
She's only got what? Order. Andrew Ranger.
Question 5, Mr Speaker.
You can't just keep asking questions, Shadow Secretary of State. You're only allowed 2, and that's your second.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The growth mission is the central priority for this government. Our new industrial strategy and National Wealth Fund will boost economic growth across Wales, creating jobs and driving up living standards. Working alongside ministerial colleagues, I was pleased to confirm £320 million of funding for 2 investment zones in Wales, the green light on the free port in the Celtic Sea, and protection for local community growth funding across Wales.
Andrew Ranger.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I thank the Secretary of State for that answer. Universities in Wales, such as Wrexham University in my constituency, are not just crucial for the educational and research outcomes they provide, but also in the economic opportunities they give our towns and cities. With a recent report by Universities Wales showing their contribution to the economy standing at £11 billion. At a time when we are firmly in pursuit of economic growth, can the Secretary of State tell me what conversations she has had that will ensure universities in Wales are partners in this mission? And will the Minister agree to visit Wrexham University with me to see firsthand the brilliant work they are doing, working in collaboration with local businesses?
Firstly, I'd be delighted to go back to Wrexham again and visit the university with my honourable friend. Welsh universities will benefit from record levels of investment in research and development worth over £20 billion next year. The budget also confirmed £160 million of funding for the Wrexham and Flintshire Investment Zone, chosen due to the presence of world-renowned research institutions like Wrexham and like Bangor University.
Colin Lockhart.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. We say the phrase "no farmers, no food" so often, but never has there been a need for such emphasis in the wake of the autumn budget. Farmers, whether in Wales, Northern Ireland or right across this United Kingdom, are reeling from the change in APR and the impact it will have on the future of family farms. What is the Secretary of State doing to support farmers and making this case in Treasury?
Secretary of State.
I thank the honourable lady for her question. This government continues to provide significant tax relief for farmers. For example, farming parents are able to pass up to £3 million to their children free of tax. They then pay half the normal inheritance tax rate on anything over £3 million, and they have up to 10 years to pay it. The vast majority of farms will be unaffected by the changes in the budget and will continue to not pay inheritance tax.
Jones!
Question number 6, please, Mr. Speaker.
Front bench.
Cutting waiting lists is a top priority for both this government and the Welsh Government. Last week's spending review provided the Welsh Government with its largest real-term settlement since devolution, including an additional £1.7 billion for 2025-26, enabling them to spend more on public services like the NHS. I continue to collaborate with ministerial colleagues in both governments with the aim of driving down waiting lists.
Ruth Jones.
I thank the Secretary of State for her answer, and I welcome this new partnership between the Welsh and the UK Government, which represents a real opportunity to share best practices and help cut NHS waiting lists in England and Wales. So could the Secretary of State expand on how she will ensure that patients on both sides of the border can get access to the best healthcare possible in a timely manner?
Both governments are working collaboratively to make the NHS fit for the future. We provided £1.7 billion boost for Welsh Government to spend on public services like the NHS. The Welsh Government have just announced £28 million to cut NHS waiting times. Both governments are sharing best practice and will consider more cross-border arrangements where capacity allows. The Welsh Government's Ministerial Advisory Group on NHS performance and productivity has been established to support improvements and bring down long waiting lists.
Robin Swan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Secretary of State will know that health has devolved across all the nations. Can she reassure me that the Secretary of State for Health will work with the devolved health ministers to make sure that we can truly engender a national health service for the likes of mental health across this nation?
Secretary of State.
I know that the Health and Social Care Secretary wants to ensure that the National Health Service across all our 4 nations is fit for the future.
This is Savile Roberts.
The BMA in Wales says that GP funding has decreased as a percentage of the Welsh Government's budget by over 2.6% since 2005. Trevelyan surgery in Portelli cannot afford to fill key staff roles now. Budget measures will cost them an extra £19,000. Now, the Secretary of State for Wales knows the state of the NHS in Wales. So why is she instrumental in Labour at both ends of the M4 threatening GP surgeries?
Secretary of State.
We are not threatening GP surgeries, and if the Right Honourable Lady does not think that a £1.7 billion additional funding to spend on the NHS in Wales as a result of the budget isn't a great idea, then she needs to say what she would do instead.
Clive Jones.
Number 7, please, Mr. Speaker.
Minister. Who's answering?
Sorry, Mr. Speaker. I recently met the Deputy First Minister of Wales to discuss a range of matters relating to farming. In September, the Interministerial Group meeting on rural affairs agreed to improve food security and environmental land management by increasing the exchange of data and insights of farming support schemes. I was also pleased to see the budget protecting Welsh farm budgets at current levels for the financial year.
Clive Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Secretary of State, whilst in opposition, warned that the New Zealand trade deal would push Welsh farmers into bankruptcy and noted that Australian meat is produced at a far lower standard than in Wales. I agree, my constituents want high-quality Welsh lamb, beef and chicken. Therefore, will the Minister push her colleagues in the Department of Business and Trade to review the Australia and New Zealand trade agreement and get it right for our farming communities?
Minister.
Right. Well, the honourable member will know as well as I do that the new leader of the opposition is the one who sold our farmers down the river, negotiating deals with countries like Australia, leaving our farmers farmers open to increasing quotas of imported meat. But I can assure him that this government is committed to promoting robust standards nationally and internationally to protect consumer interests and to ensure that consumers have confidence in the food that they buy. We will consider the full range of tools at our disposal to uphold the UK's commitment to high standards. This includes using our influence in the World Trade Organization and other multilateral bodies to argue for better and fairer trading rules.
Steve Atherton.
Number 8, please, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Our mission is to kickstart economic growth, and this will deliver good jobs and growth in Wales. Just last month, our International Investment Summit secured over £63 billion in private investment into the UK. Since July, we've secured over £1 billion of investment into North Wales, creating and sustaining 400 well-paid jobs in manufacturing.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Secretary of State has said that economic growth is her #1 priority. Can she say how confirmation of the investment zones in the budget will help contribute to this aim?
Well, yes, indeed, Mr. Speaker. The budget included a total of £320 million as a commitment for the investment zones in Cardiff and Newport and Wrexham and Flintshire. This is a crucial part of our work with Welsh Government to provide a rocket boost to sector strengths like creative industries, life sciences and advanced manufacturing, including our world-leading compound semiconductor cluster.
Shannon.
Speaker, can I thank the Minister very much for that? Minister, when it comes to creating new jobs in Wales, in wind energy, in sea energy, there are great potential. We in Northern Ireland, and Belfast in particular, have the engineering skills to provide those turbines for that energy. So everybody can gain. Wales get the jobs, but we get the jobs as well in Northern Ireland. Thank you.
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, this government is absolutely committed to economic growth across all parts of the United Kingdom.
Can I, first of all, welcome the Leader of the Opposition? I wish her well as Leader of the Opposition. I now call Dame Caroline Dinenage.
Question number 1, Mr. Speaker.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, can I begin by congratulating President-elect Trump on his historic election victory. As the closest of allies, the UK and US will continue to work together to protect our shared values of freedom and democracy. And having had dinner with President-elect Trump just a few weeks ago, I look forward to working with him in the years to come. May I also welcome the Leader of the Opposition to her place, my 4th Tory leader in 4.5 years. But I do look forward to working with her in the interests of the British public. Mr. Speaker, this weekend is Remembrance Sunday, and people across the country will come together to pay solemn tribute to those who made the ultimate sacrifice, defending the values and freedoms that we enjoy today. And I'm sure the entire House will join me in paying tribute to them. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Dame Caroline.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My constituent Susan is going to miss out on her winter fuel allowance this winter because she's just £10 above the pension credit threshold. So as well as losing out on this vital money to keep her house warm, she also doesn't get the £150 warm home discount. She doesn't get the £169 free TV licence or free NHS prescriptions. For the sake of a tenner, Prime Minister, is this fair?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we passed a budget which was to fix the foundations of this country and to rebuild our country. And one of the issues we had to confront was the £22 billion black hole that was left by the last government. We've taken the tough decisions. That will stabilise our economy. That means we can commit to the triple lock. And that means that pensioners will be better off seeing the increase in their pension they would have been under the party opposite.
Jacob Collier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Every week I meet hard-working families in Burton and Uttoxeter who are juggling raising their children and their family finances. when they hear the party opposite and its new leader say that maternity pay has gone too far. They are terrified about what this means for them. To ease the worry felt by thousands of hard-working families, can the Prime Minister please commit that he has no plans to change maternity pay or to roll back the hard-won rights of working families?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his question. He's a champion for families in his constituency. My answer is simple: yes. And I don't agree with the Leader of the Opposition when she says that maternity pay is excessive and that it's gone too far.
I come to the Leader of the Opposition, Kemi Badenoch.
Mr. Speaker, can I thank the Prime Minister for his almost warm welcome? And can I also echo the comments that he has made? It is an immense privilege and the honour of my life to lead the Conservative Party. And I look forward to joining him at the Cenotaph this Remembrance Sunday. As Leader of His Majesty's Opposition, I will be taking a different approach to the last opposition by being a constructive opposition. And so I would like to start by congratulating President-elect Trump on his impressive victory this morning. The Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary met him in September. Did the Foreign Secretary take that opportunity to apologise for making derogatory and scatological references, including, and I quote, "Trump is not only a woman-hating, neo-Nazi sympathising sociopath, he is also a profound threat to the international order"? And if he did not apologise, will the Prime Minister do so now on his behalf?
Mr. Speaker, there will be many issues on which the Leader of the Opposition and I disagree, but there will be issues that do unite this House on national security and Ukraine, and I do look forward to working closely with her on that, and I will provide her with the information that she needs to discharge her duties. That's the right thing for the country, and it's far more important than party politics. And the Foreign Secretary and I did meet President-elect Trump just a few weeks ago for dinner for about a couple of hours, and we discussed a number of issues of global significance. It was a very constructive exercise.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister did not distance himself from the remarks made by the Foreign Secretary, and I'm very sure that President Trump will soon be calling to thank him for sending all of those North London Labour activists to campaign for his opponent. Given that most of his cabinet signed a motion to ban President Trump from addressing Parliament, will the Prime Minister show that he and his government can be more than student politicians by asking the Speaker to extend? Can they show that they can be more than student politicians?
Order. Mr. Perkins, I don't need to anymore. Your voice curries, it's like mine, too loud.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the Prime Minister show that he and his government can be more than student politicians by asking you, Mr. Speaker, to extend an invitation to President Trump to address Parliament on his next visit?
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition is giving a masterclass on student politics. Seriously, Mr. Speaker, we live in probably a more volatile world than we've lived in for many decades. It is absolutely crucial that we have a strong relationship, that strong special relationship forged in difficult circumstances between the US and the UK. We will continue to work, as we have done in the 4 months in government, on issues of security, our economy and global conflict.
Mr. Speaker, he does not answer the questions, just read the lines the officials have prepared for him. It doesn't sound like he wants to invite President-elect Trump to Parliament. He needs to look after the special relationship. The US is our single biggest trade partner. Given the risk of increased tariffs on UK exports, which threaten our manufacturing sector, will the Prime Minister commit now to continue the negotiations on our free trade agreement with the US, which the Biden administration cancelled when they came into office?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, of course we will discuss issues of our economy with the President-elect, as we already have done. Economy, security and global conflict are issues of real significance that ought to unite this House. But when it comes to the economy, what we've done with our budget is to fix the foundations after 14 years of return to economic stability after a £23 million black hole. We've protected the pay slips of working people. We've done the single biggest investment in our country for a generation in the NHS, in schools and homes. We've given a pay rise to the 3 million lowest paid. Now, if she's opposed to that investment or the pay rise for working people, she's a straight talker, as I understand it. Perhaps she should say so.
Mr. Speaker, discuss, chat. He has no plans whatsoever. No plans whatsoever for building on the special relationship. He needs to realise that we in this country rely on our single biggest trade partner. President Trump is also right to argue that Europe needs to increase its defence spending. The last Conservative government committed to raising defence spending to 2.5% by 2030. Will the Prime Minister finally match this commitment?
Mr. Speaker, there is no more important duty than keeping the people of this country safe. And it was the Labour government that signed the NATO treaty in the first place, and we are strong supporters. We have a strategic defence review. We are committed to 2.5%. Well, I would remind the last time 2.5 was met was under the last Labour government. 14 years, and they never did it once. Last year, the NAO identified a £17 billion black hole in the MOD finances. The former Defence Secretary said the previous government hollowed out the armed forces, and the plan they put forward at the election was pure fantasy.
Mr. Speaker, he will not make that commitment. That is very clear. All that he is doing...
I'm going to hear the questions. If the people who don't want to hear it, they can leave now. Come on.
Mr. Speaker, he will not make that commitment, and yet the world is getting more dangerous. His Chancellor's budget did not even mention defence. The Chancellor's budget last week was a copy and paste of Bidenomics. It turns out that a high spending, high borrowing, high inflation approach is less popular than she may have thought. May I suggest he now urge her to change course, or is he determined to be a one-term leader?
Prime Minister! The one thing I learned as Leader of the Opposition is it's a good idea to listen to what the government is actually saying. I think she just said that defence wasn't mentioned in the budget. It was 7 days ago that it was absolutely clear and central to the budget, as was economic growth. We are fixing the foundations. We're giving a pay rise to millions of people. We're picking up the mess that they left, £22 billion, and a tax rise and a pay rise for working people. And I haven't heard yet her welcome that pay rise for the 3 million lowest paid workers. Does she now welcome it? Does she stick to her previous policy that it's excessive?
Mr. Speaker, I was the one who raised the minimum wage last year as Business Secretary. I have a strong record on this, but we need to make sure that we balance the books. His scripted lines are showing that he has not even listened to the budget himself. So I will try a different question. Perhaps he can give something that is unscripted to the people watching. Farmers across the United Kingdom... Mr. Speaker...
Order! I don't need any help. Can I just say, if somebody wants to leave, I'll be helping them do that. I'm going to hear the question, and I certainly want to hear the answer as well. So please, let's have some courtesy.
Mr. Speaker, we have heard him repeat the lines on the television, fixing the foundations and so on. But what does he say, over and over again, but what does he say to farmers who are facing uncertainty about their futures as a result of the increased taxes announced by the Chancellor? I am very clear that we would reverse Labour's cruel family farms tax. What can he say now to reassure the farming community, who provide security for the whole nation?
Prime Minister.
I'm happy to help the Leader of the Opposition. If she's going to complain about scripted answers, it's probably best not to read that from a script. What I will say about farmers is this. I'm glad she's raised farmers because the budget last week put £5 billion over the next 2 years into farming. That's the single biggest increase, unlike the £300 million, which was underspent under the last government. And when it comes to inheritance, the vast majority of farmers will be unaffected, as she well knows, as they well know. But that budget was about fixing the foundations, fixing the whole $22 billion that they left, and investing in the future of our country, investing in our NHS, investing in our schools, our hospitals and our homes. And I'm proud that that's the investment work. And if they oppose it, they should go out there and tell their constituents they're against that investment in the future of our country. That's the difference. A Labour government taking us forward. They're stuck in the past.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I'm going to hear Matthew Patrick.
Mr. Speaker, Emily left her ex, but the abuse did not stop. He stayed in their home, cancelled the mortgage contributions and destroyed her credit score. Now she cannot even take out a mobile phone contract. Surviving economic abuse and UK finance have made progress tackling this issue, but more has to be done. Will the Prime Minister and his government work with me to introduce new provisions so that we can restore the credit files for survivors of economic abuse like Emily?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for raising this really important issue, because economic abuse has a devastating impact on victims, leaving them vulnerable and isolated. And we are committed to ending this national emergency and keeping women safe from domestic abuse, harassment and stalking. And, Mr. Speaker, that includes £200,000 this year to the charity Surviving Economic Abuse, and HMRC have launched an online tool to help charities and businesses identify and respond to economic abuse. And I'll make sure he has a meeting with the relevant minister.
Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey.
Can I join the Prime Minister in his comments about Remembrance Sunday? We must always remember the brave British men and women who gave their lives for our country. And can I join him in welcoming the Conservative leader to her place? And can I congratulate her on becoming the first black leader of a UK-wide party, a major and historic achievement? Mr. Speaker, President-elect Trump praised Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine. And I quote, he called it genius. He also said he would encourage Russia to do whatever the hell they want to NATO allies. So what action is the Prime Minister taking to encourage a Trump presidency to change its mind? Because otherwise it's a huge threat to global security and to national security in the UK. Does he agree with me that the US will not oppose President Putin and support our brave Ukrainian allies? The UK must lead in Europe so that together we do.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very proud that in this House we are united on the question of Ukraine and clear about Russian aggression, and we will continue to do so. I've long taken the view that the only winner, if we are divided in this House, is Putin, and I'm not prepared to let that happen. Our relationship with the US is a strong relationship forged in very difficult circumstances historically. It remains as strong today as it was when it was first forged, and I look forward to working with President-elect Trump to ensure that relationship stays the special relationship.
Sir David.
I'm grateful for the Prime Minister's comments on Ukraine, but Donald Trump has also said that trade wars are good. He calls himself tariff man. People are really worried that Trump trade wars and tariff will damage our economy, damage businesses and hit the cost of living here in the UK. So, given this, does the Prime Minister recognise that it's more urgent than ever that we support our British economy by getting rid of the damaging trade barriers with Europe put in place by the Conservatives?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, as he will know, we've put the economy centrepiece to our budget, and we will do everything that we need to do to ensure our economy grows, and that's measured in living standards going up for working people across the country. Thank you.
Alex Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There are so many families across Aldershot and Farnborough who have struggled for years to get their children the need they help with special educational needs. It is therefore shameful to read misguided claims that autistic people may well get better treatment and receive economic privileges and protections made by the Leader of the Opposition. Will the Prime Minister stand with families of autistic children and distance this government from those awful words?
Mr. Speaker, I'll leave the Leader of the Opposition to respond to those words. As the recent NAO report exposed, under the previous government, children with SEND were being failed by the system. And this has come up, I think, now 5 times in the last 2 or 3 weeks at PMQs. It's clearly a serious issue. Our focus will be ensuring every child receives the right support to succeed in their education.
Source Eastwood.
Mr. Speaker, Prime Minister, Northern Ireland is considered one of the most dangerous places in Europe to be a woman. In the last 4 years, 24 women have been killed. But one of the most dangerous places for women and girls is online. I also want to pay tribute to the work of Belfast and Lisburn Women's Aid, who are tireless in their advocacy for women. So what is this government doing to keep women and girls safe online, not just in Lagan Valley, but right across the United Kingdom?
Prime Minister.
Well, the right honourable member is right to draw attention to this issue. Misogyny and abuse, both online and offline, causes horrendous harm to women and girls across the UK. And can I just commend her honesty and bravery in speaking out about her own experiences and her dedication to creating safe spaces for women in her constituency. We must create a safer world online for women and girls through the Online Safety Act, mitigating the risk of illegal content and activity which is abusive or incites hatred.
Bill Cole.
Everyone in Southwark will benefit from the positive measures in the budget last week, especially the thousands on the minimum wage getting a real terms increase to help themselves, help their families and help the economy. But the new leader of the Tory party, this week's leader, is on record as saying she wants to scrap it, having seemingly learnt nothing from July. Will the Prime Minister pledge to protect the minimum wage and increase it in this Parliament as finances allow?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the last Labour government transformed the labour market with the national minimum wage, something which was opposed by the party opposite at the time. And sadly, they don't seem to have changed. I was surprised by the comments of the Leader of the Opposition. I was surprised to see the new Shadow Business Secretary say the minimum wage, and this is a quote, something legislators pass to make themselves feel good. I disagree, and I'm very proud of the fact that this Labour government has raised wages for 3 million of low-paid workers, and I expect the party opposite to welcome that.
George Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After 14 years shaping the UK's long-term strategies for life science, agri-tech, fusion and space, I welcome the government's industrial strategy. But too many of our great companies are being bought out by our competitors. To build the industries of tomorrow here, we need to unlock some of the hundreds of billions in UK pension funds in the city, only 3% of which are now investing in UK equities. With the new Lord Mayor making this a priority and the Mansion House speech imminent, will the new government commit to see through the last government's reforms to unlock British capital for British R&D growth?
Well, I thank him for welcoming the industrial strategy, and I do know this is an issue close to his heart that he has spoken about and acted on for many years. The budget sees record numbers of R&D investment, with over 20 billion next year, including over 2 billion to support our world-leading life sciences sector. And through the British Growth Partnership, we'll crowd in pension funds investment to support innovative business. And we've launched our landmark pensions review to unlock the billions of investment into the UK and boost growth and living standards across the country. Thank you.
Catherine Fuchs.
Mr. Speaker, as the Chancellor said last week, we were left a toxic legacy by the previous government, including rivers filled with polluted waste. Will the Prime Minister put the River Wye into special measures by designating it a water protection zone? And will he meet with me and the excellent cross-border Wye Catchment Partnership to deliver their plan to clean up the Wye?
Prime Minister.
The River Wye is one of our most important, iconic rivers, and we are working closely with the Welsh Government on this pressing issue. A destruction of our waterways should never have been allowed, and that's why we launched a Water Commission to attract investment and speed up infrastructure delivery. And we introduced legislation to enable tougher penalties and severe fines to crack down on polluters. I will make sure that she gets a meeting with the relevant minister.
Power of the House to Edward Lee.
As a good lawyer, I know the Prime Minister will want to listen to the evidence. So if the evidence mounts from experts in organisations such as the NFU that smaller family farms of average size, 250 acres, are going to be severely impacted by this tax, in a spirit of compromise, will he listen to the evidence, keep an open mind, and perhaps be prepared to raise the thresholds to preserve our family farms?
Mr. Speaker, we are listening to farmers, and the Environment Secretary and the Treasury Ministers met with the NFU on Monday of this week. We have taken a fair and balanced approach. The vast majority of farms will not be affected by this. But what I will also say this, having grown up in a rural community, I know that rural communities also need an NHS that's back on its feet. They also need schools that their children can go to and homes that their families can afford to live in. But we will continue to talk to the NFU and others.
Mary Glenda.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This week, the Leader of the Opposition told us that any outrage at suitcases full of wine and karaoke machines in Downing Street, whilst people across the country were told to stay at home, was all overblown. For the people and businesses in my constituency who followed the rules, many of us at great personal cost, this is an insult. Will the Prime Minister join me in ensuring that as a country we learn the lessons from COVID, and as a party the Conservatives learn the lessons of their behaviour too?
Mr. Speaker, across the country people made enormous sacrifices during COVID. They missed weddings, births, deaths. Really important moments in their lives and their families' lives. In doing so, they saved the lives of people they will probably never meet. That was a collective effort, and unfortunately the party opposite who set the rules did not follow them themselves. It was a betrayal of those that did, and I think the Leader of the Opposition was wrong to describe the public anger and upset as overblown. I'm sure she'll want to clarify that at the first opportunity.
Cyfarwydd, Glan Horse Nursing Home is in my constituency in Ysmôn. Tell me that the budget changes mean a 10% increase in their cost. That's a staggering £127,500 extra in-year cost. Will the Prime Minister reconsider the rise in the employer's national insurance?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, what we did in the budget last week was to ensure that no one would face tax rises in their pay slip. We had to deal with the £22 billion black hole, but when we did so, we protected the smallest businesses and charities. We doubled the employment allowance to £10,500. That means that 40% of employers won't pay employers' NICs. Companies with 4 employees or less on a minimum wage will pay no employer NICs at all, and half of businesses that pay NICs will see no change or pay less after the budget. Thank you.
Bill Brickle.
My constituents in Bolton West were pleased to hear last week's budget prioritise investment in public infrastructure, including important projects such as the electrification of the Wigan to Bolton railway line, which will deliver more reliable and greener journeys. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that investment in the key infrastructure of towns such as Horwich West Horton, Blackrod and Bolton is the only way to deliver economic growth and prosperity for all.
Prime Minister.
Well, my honourable friend is a champion for the North West, and the budget secured investment for vital transport projects to transform connectivity across the north of England and drive economic growth. And that includes completing the Wigan to Bolton electrification, a really important momentum on the Northern Powerhouse Rail. Over £5 billion to support everyday journeys for working people. By restoring economic stability, increasing investment, we're taking our country forward.
Victoria Pullins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Swan Youth Project in Berkhamsted is an incredible drop-in centre that intervenes to bring hope and a better future to teenagers like Lex and Megan who've been facing anxiety, depression and long mental health waiting lists, as well as families coping with SEND. They've already written to the Treasury saying that they're worried about getting the funds that they need as our communities face a tough winter and grants are depleting. Parole, the manager, also assures me that she makes a mean curry and would welcome the Prime Minister. So will the Prime Minister join me to discuss their concerns and ensure that organisations in the third sector like theirs get the support that they need as they work tirelessly for our communities?
Prime Minister.
She'll be pleased now. I've been to Berkhamsted a number of times. We've got very good friends who live there. And I want to pay tribute to the work of the Swan Youth Project, because too many young people, she's cited some, are struggling with mental health and not receiving the support that they need. And that's why we will recruit an additional 8,500 mental health workers and are introducing reforms to the Mental Health Act, long overdue, and that's happening today. Of course, we will also put more money into SEND, but we also need to look at reforming SEND, something that I think and hope will be supported across this House, and I'll make sure she gets a meeting with the relevant ministers about that.
My right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, will know that after 14 years of Tory ideological hostility and cuts, our universities are in financial meltdown. In my own constituency of Norwich South, the University of East Anglia is having to make redundancies, as are many others. Our honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Education, has started to address the problem, but we need a longer-term solution that doesn't simply saddle more debt on our young people. So can my right honourable friend say how we can move to fix the foundations of higher education as we go forward?
Prime Minister.
I thank him for that question. He's right to raise higher education, because we inherited a sector facing severe financial challenges. Universities have suffered real terms decline in their income, and the gap between disadvantaged students and their peers is the highest on record. We've had to take tough decisions to put that on a secure footing, but we are also taking the step of easing the living pressures by increasing the maintenance loans, which is worth £414 extra per year. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Alex Brooke.
Hamilton, former sub-postmistress and constituent of North East Hampshire, has long been campaigning along with Alan Bates for compensation following the Horizon Post Office scandal. Can the Prime Minister give an exact time frame in which those who have been waiting over a decade might finally be compensated?
I'm grateful to her for raising this important issue, because a commitment was made to properly compensate the victims of this scandal. Unfortunately, regrettably, having made that commitment, the party opposite, when in government, didn't allocate any money to that compensation. Her constituents will be pleased to know that we have changed the approach there. We've set out the compensation within the budget, a transparent budget, an accountable budget, and we'll make the payments just as soon as we can.
Torquil Triton.
Speaker, may I quickly echo the Prime Minister's sentiments to that other son of Lewis, though I wish I had woken up today in the Isle of Harris. My constituents there face long delays, cancellations and loss of service because of the SNP's incompetent handling of ferry procurement. In last week's budget, the Scottish Government received a record settlement. Can I urge the Prime Minister to tell Scottish ministers to use that to improve public service in Scotland, to invest in the NHS in Hill and Year, to build schools in places like Barra, and to finally fix the ferry fiasco?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, last week in the budget we delivered the largest settlement for the Scottish Government in real terms since devolution. That That includes £3.4 billion through the Barnett formula, a fuel duty freeze, an increase to the national living wage, benefiting his constituencies and all those across Scotland. And the result of the budget is now clear. The SNP in power in Scotland have the powers, they now have the money, they've got no more excuses.
Better be objective.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Prime Minister really think it is acceptable for a backbench MP to suggest that the Leader of the Opposition represents white supremacy in blackface and is the most prominent member of white supremacy's black collaborator class, with all the race traitor innuendo that carries? And if he doesn't, why hasn't he removed the whip?
Prime Minister.
No, I don't.
John Slinger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a semi-retired violinist and rock musician asking a semi-retired multi-instrumentalist, I feel confident that the Prime Minister shares my belief in the importance of music education. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that as we unleash the potential of our country, we must invest in the educational infrastructure of creative arts subjects so that they're accessible to all? And will he visit my constituency to see the great work of the schools there, despite the inheritance we received?
Prime Minister.
I'm not sure about the description semi-retired, although that may be the wish of the party opposite. But on music, what I do know from personal experience is music, the creatives and art are really important for children and young people in terms of the pleasure it gives them, the knowledge, but the working in groups and the leadership. And that's why we are determined to ensure that they are counted subjects again within the curriculum, which will encourage many more schools to provide it within the curriculum and enrich the futures of children and young people across the country.
James Cleverly.
Before the election, he claimed that he would not put up national insurance contributions. He put it up. Before the election, he claimed he would scrap tuition fees. He put it up. Before the election, he said he would not tax family farms. He's taxing family farms. Will he address his party's growing reputation for dishonesty by making good on his commitment to close the Wethersfield Asylum Accommodation Centre in my constituency?
Mr. Speaker, we're keeping the promises we made in our manifesto. His problem is he can't add up. If he could add up, he might be down here rather than up there, and we'll take up the issue in his constituency.
Douglas McAllister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Monday of this week marked the 7-year anniversary of my constituent Jacktar Singh Johal's arbitrary detention in India. Can the Prime Minister assure me that he and his government will do all they can to secure his immediate release and bring him home?
Yes, we're absolutely committed to pushing the Government of India on this really important case. And the Foreign Secretary has raised it and will continue to do so, and we'll make sure that we speak to him as we do.
Right, that completes Prime Minister's questions. Urgent question, Leader of the House. Is it related to PMQs?
It is relating to PMQs, Mr. Speaker. It's an urgent question. I just wondered whether the Leader of the Opposition wanted to correct the record, because she said in Prime Minister's question that the Chancellor didn't mention defence spending in her budget, yet she mentioned it many, many times, including allocating £2.9 billion, which far exceeds our...
Well, can I first of all say it's not for me to correct the record, and it's not a point of order, but you've already done it for them. Right, we'll now come to the urgent question. Chris Phil.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could I ask the Home Secretary to make a statement on the recent increase in dangerous, illegal and unnecessary channel crossings by small boat?
Mr. Speaker, for too long smuggling gangs have been undermining our border security and putting lives at risk, which is why the new government has made it a top priority to address the crisis we inherited. And let us be clear about what that crisis entailed. Small boat crossings in the first half of the year at their highest point on record, and over 100,000 arrivals in the 5 years prior. Over 200,000 cases stuck in the asylum system, costing the taxpayer billions in support, and 700 million spent on a gimmick that sent just 4 volunteers to Rwanda. When we entered government, we said it was time for grip, not gimmicks, and that is exactly what we are delivering. Since July, we have established the Border Security Command, headed up by experienced Police Chief Martin Hewitt. In the King's Speech, we set out our intention to bring forward legislation to give the border security system stronger powers to investigate and prosecute organised immigration crime. We're recruiting 100 new specialist agency and investigation officers at the National Crime Agency to target and dismantle the criminal networks behind this phenomenon. And we have announced an extra £75 million to bolster border security, bringing our investment in the Border Security Command over the next 2 years to £150 million. This government's border security funding will go towards a range of enforcement and intelligence activities and capabilities, including covert technology, as well as hundreds of staff and specialist investigators as we crank up the pressure on the smuggling gangs. This is an international problem requiring international solutions. Since the general election, we have intensified cooperation with partners overseas. We recently struck a new anti-smuggling action plan with G7 partners, and the Prime Minister and Home Secretary both attended the Interpol General Assembly in Glasgow on Monday to press the case for a much stronger and more integrated global response to organised immigration crime. As well as tackling this issue upstream, we've taken action to speed up decision-making and stepped up returns of those with no right to be in this country. The result of all this action is 9,400 returns since this government took office, including a 19% increase in enforced returns and a 14% increase in returns of foreign national offenders. Mr. Speaker, sticking plasters and gimmicks have failed. The smugglers and traffickers have been getting away with it for far too long. It's time to show them we're serious, not with words, but with action. The security of Britain's borders is paramount, and under this government, it always will be.
Shadow Leader of the House, Chris.
Shadow Home Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I'm afraid the government's actions belie the reality. Since they came to office, 17,520 people have crossed the English Channel, more than twice the number they've removed. That is 1.5 times the number in the previous 4 months, and it is 15% more than the same period last year. In October alone, last month, 5,417 people crossed. That is 3 times higher than last October. And tragically, since this government came to office, 50 people have lost their lives or have gone missing. That is more than the previous 18 months put together. And tragically, that includes 16 women and children. Now, this government they chose to cancel the Rwanda scheme before it had even started. The first flight was due to take off, I believe, from memory, on the 24th of July, but they cancelled it. Now, had they allowed that flight to go ahead, had they allowed the scheme to continue, the deterrent effect would by now have started. And we know it works. We know it works because it worked in Australia under their Operation Sovereign Borders about 10 years ago. We know the deterrent effect of returns works because it worked with Albania, where we secured a 93% reduction in arrivals. And don't take my word for it, the National Crime Agency said that law enforcement alone is not enough, and you need an effective removal scheme in order to deter crossings. Their announcements in Glasgow on Monday are simply not enough, and they simply repeat work underway already. But it's not just the NCA and me saying we need a returns deterrent. The European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen encouraged member states just a few weeks ago to develop their own returns hubs outside of the EU. So will she follow Ursula von der Leyen's advice and urgently implement offshore processing? Might I also draw attention to the success Belgium has had in stopping boats by the shore? Will she ask France to do the same? And finally, Mr. Speaker, because of their failings, Labour is breaking their manifesto pledge to end hotel use. So will she pledge not to open any more hotels?
Minister.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I say, first of all, in welcoming him to his new front bench position, what a pleasure it is to be opposite him. And I'm going to look forward to jousting with him over the years. On Rwanda, from when it began to when we scrapped it, during that period, 83,500 people crossed in small boats. If that's a deterrent, then I think the honourable gentleman has got a peculiar view of what the meaning of deterrent is in the English language. Now, obviously, Mr. Speaker, when I realised we were doing this UQ, I took the opportunity of having a look at his record as a Home Office minister. And while he was a minister at the Home Office, for his first stint, during his first stint at the Home Office, September 2019 to 2021, 23,849 people crossed the Channel on small boats. When he was, during his second ministerial sojourn at the Home Office, 50,637 people crossed the Channel in small boats. So his overall total is 74,486. He was saying in September 2021, the honourable member for Croydon South answered one of these UQs, and I'm quoting him here. He said, "This government," meaning the last government, "will not rest until we've taken the necessary steps to completely end these crossings." How did that go, Mr. Speaker?
Mike Tapp.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 2018, 400 crossed the Channel. Since then, over 140,000 have crossed, the majority of which were on the party opposite's watch. And all they could introduce were ridiculous gimmicks like Rwanda, which cost the taxpayers millions of pounds. Does the Minister agree that the new injection of cash into the Border Security Command is a better use of taxpayers' money than the gimmicks the party opposite introduced?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I agree wholeheartedly with that. The issue here is dealing with cross-border organised immigration crime, and to do that, you have to, Mr. Speaker, talk to your international allies and cooperate with them cross-border. That is exactly what the creation of the Border Security Command will do, both operationally and politically, and we will see the results.
We now come to the Liberal Democrat spokesperson, Lisa Smart.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I want to join the Minister in welcoming the new Shadow Home Secretary to his place. Leading with the chin on the first full day in the job is an interesting approach, but if any situation highlights the manifest failings of the last Conservative government, it is surely this. We in this House, Mr. Speaker, all want to stop the dangerous Channel crossings, and I'm afraid the last government totally failed at this, so I really am surprised we are discussing this today. The asylum backlog ballooned under the Tories, and the human beings we are talking about who are in these small boats are often victims to smuggling and trafficking gangs who profit on human suffering. So does the Minister agree that it is therefore imperative that we work closer than ever before in coordination with Europol and our French counterparts to smash these criminal networks? I urge the government, while I'm on my feet, Mr. Speaker, to address the root causes of this problem, not just the symptoms. We must empower the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office to provide robust aid to regions in an increasingly unstable world.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Lady is exactly right. This isn't about gimmicks. It's not about having a parallel immigration policy that's unconnected with any of the treaties we've signed or international law. It's about doing the day job and making sure that you don't leave your inheritor government a 200,000 person backlog because you haven't been doing the day job. The issue with small boat crossings is to deal with organised, internationally focused immigration crime, which is often originated in countries very far away. We have to cooperate with the forces of law and order and operationally across borders to tackle this, and that is what this government is determined to do.
Sean Davis.
Can I welcome the government's approach on this issue, a 23% increase in enforced removals compared to last summer, and agree with the Minister that the way to deal with this issue is to smash the criminal gangs. Can I urge her, though, to consider what attention she gives to the Shadow Home Secretary, who, when he was the Home Office Minister, imposed hotels on my constituency and was the Chief Secretary of State to Liz Truss during the mini-budget?
Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, I think that the honourable gentleman's record in office is a matter that we may well keep coming back to. I agree with the observations that my honourable friend has made.
Chair of the Select Committee, Dame Curran Bradley.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Everybody in this House wants to see an end to small boat crossings and the risk that people put themselves at to cross the Channel. She's announced a number of measures this week. Would she give an assessment of when she expects those measures to start to see a reduction in crossings, and will she commit to keeping the Select Committee informed of progress?
Minister.
Well, it's my first chance, Mr Speaker, to congratulate the Right Honourable Lady on her chairing of the Select Committee, and as always I look forward to coming before her whenever she feels she wishes to talk to me, and certainly the department, I know, wish to keep her informed about what is going on. I think there's been a significant shift in international cooperation with the G7 collaboration on smuggling, with the European political community dialogues, and there's a meeting tomorrow where we hope there'll be some announcements. And also the government's been working on bilateral memorandums of understandings and action plans across Europe to achieve a step change in cooperation cross-border, which is the key to beginning to tackle this awful criminal smuggling activity.
Chris Murray. Mr. Wyatt.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. In the 5 years before the election, I worked on preventing human trafficking in Scotland, including with many of the victims who came on small boat crossings. They have gone through the most appalling abuse that chills the soul. Does the Minister agree with me that public money is far better spent on smashing the gangs and freeing the victims than it is in a Rwanda plan that was never going to work?
Yes, Mr Speaker, I agree profoundly with my honourable friend, which is why the new government has changed tack in this area, and I'm sure we will see the results in due course.
Well, Thank
you, Mr Speaker. The government has pledged millions of pounds to smashing the gang, on top of the millions of pounds that we spent on stopping boats. The government has pledged more drones on the Channel and fast-tracking of cases, like we deployed drones on the Channel and fast-tracked cases. The government has set up a border security command, which sounds remarkably similar to the small boat operational command that we set up when in government. What, other than scrapping the one thing that would have worked, i.e. the deterrent, has this government done that is different, that is actually going to stop the boats?
Well, firstly, the Border Security Command is completely different operationally to the command on the Channel, which is deliberately there to try to save life and find out what's going on the water. Operationally, the Border Security Command will cooperate across borders in a much different way. And if I were the Right Honourable Lady, I wouldn't be boasting about the morass of colossal wasted expenditure that the Rwanda scheme represented. £700 million down the drain, with plans to spend nearly £10 billion over the next few years on that plan. It was a gross waste of money which didn't deter a single boat crossing.
Holly Billington.
Mr Speaker, the gangs who run this vile trade care only for their own profits, not for the lives
that they put at risk. Will the Minister reassure this House and my constituents of East Thanet that everything that will be done by the Border Security Command to break the evil smuggling gangs and bring the ringleaders to justice?
Yes, that is the point of the increase in operational cooperation cross borders, so that if we can't bring people to justice in our jurisdiction, we can ensure that information is swapped in real time so that these people can be brought to justice in other jurisdictions. There's going to be a step change in that kind of international cooperation, which will deliver results.
James Cleverly.
Will she describe clearly, without bluster, unambiguously, the difference in function between the Border Security Command and the Small Boats Operation Command?
Mr. Speaker, the Border Security Command isn't only focused on channel crossings. It's much more about using our intelligence capabilities and our operational arm to cooperate cross borders in other jurisdictions in real time to ensure that organised criminal gangs can be tracked and apprehended so that they can be dismantled. And the thing is that we have given now 150 million extra to the Border Security Command to start doing this work, whereas the command on the Channel is about saving lives and cooperating with the French once people have reached the beaches. It's far too late once people have reached the beaches. We need to go far back to the origin countries and do a lot more work there.
Amanda Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the Minister acknowledge the real concerns felt by people in the UK and in my city of Portsmouth around the small boat crossings? And, Mr. Speaker, does the Minister agree that the recent 23% increase in enforced returns of people who have no right to be here compared to last summer shows what can be done when grown-ups are in the room and when a government focuses on getting agreement?
Mr. Speaker, I agree absolutely with the points that my honourable friend has just made.
Mr. Speaker, there are 120 conflicts globally. This and other factors such as poverty, food insecurity, the effects of climate change cause populations to move. Does the Minister agree that it is essential, as my honourable friend pointed out, that we look at the root causes of immigration, and therefore does she support an increase in the development and aid budget rather than the cut in ODA in the budget last week?
Well, Mr. Speaker, in the end, any work we can do upstream, whether it's development work or aid, is going to deal with some of the causes, and the honourable lady is right to point out what some of those are. However, we have to stay within the bounds set by the budget, but I can assure her that I regard prevention as much better than cure.
Mr. Strafford.
Inherited a situation on our borders that was failing on all fronts. Record numbers of tragic deaths in the Channel, millions wasted on the failed Rwanda gimmick, and criminal gangs profiteering off exploiting our borders. Can the Minister reassure my constituents that, unlike the previous government, we won't waste time on political gimmicks, but will focus on the practical measures that can bring an end to the persistence of these damning failures?
Mr. Speaker, I can assure my honourable friend that we will do exactly that, and that's why we've seen a step change in returns since this government took office. 9,400 in that period, including a 19% increase in enforced returns and a 14% increase in returns of foreign national offenders. We will ensure that our immigration system has integrity, Mr.
Pete Wishaw.
Speaker, sometimes when you listen to exchanges between the Labour front bench and the Conservatives, you actually forget that we are dealing with real people fleeing the most unimaginable horrors. So can I ask the Minister, other than this berserk Rwanda plan, why is she continuing with the same failed approach as the Tories? They continue to spend millions on hotels, drones, various bits of high tech. How about trying something different? How about looking at safe and legal routes to smash the gang? And how about showing some compassion?
I'm not going to get into a competition with the honourable gentleman about compassion. We have a duty to ensure that people that come to our shores who are asylum seekers are properly processed and dealt with and integrated into our society if that is granted. But what I'm not going to do, despite the honourable gentleman chuntering away, is stand here and say that we're going to let people smugglers for money exploiting people decide who comes to our country. We have to stop this trade. That is not at odds with treating those who arrive here with compassion.
Joe White.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When I stood for election on the 4th of July this year, my commitment to my voters is that we would smash the criminal gangs and stop the small boats. At that point in time, the number of small boat crossings was 6% higher than the worst ever year of 2022. Does the Minister welcome with me that that data, compared to 2022, we are now 9,000 lower than what we were then?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, but I think the House has to have patience. There are no magic wands to wave in this area, and there are no fantasy policies now we've gotten rid of the Rwanda scheme. What there is hard, day-to-day operational work to try to get the system we inherited, which is in complete chaos with huge backlogs, back into some kind of order so that we can run it properly, fairly and efficiently, and that is what we are focusing on.
Andrew Snow.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I recently listened to an interview with a retired former Inspector of Borders and Immigration who was responding to the announcements the government has made, and his concerns that he outlined were that the measures in their own right, without an effective deterrent, he was concerned about what impact they will actually have and how the government is going to measure the success of the announcements that have been made in terms of the percentage or volume of small boat crossings that they want to see reduced for the announcements they've made. So can the Minister confirm, as a result of the announcements that were made, what percentage reduction in small boats the government would view as success?
Mr. Speaker, I'm not getting into a numbers game in this House. We are trying to deal with a trade that was allowed to become established on the previous government's watch, which has been industrialised on the previous government's watch, which we are now trying to dismantle. I'm not going to stand here and say it will happen overnight, but we will make progress.
Fred Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And folks in Plymouth are really interested in how the government is going to solve this big problem. They will welcome the increase in money towards this problem and the increase in returns. But another thing they want is constructive, lively debate with ideas in this place. Unfortunately, the opposition seems so devoid of ideas, Mr. Speaker. They're going to bang on for another 4 years about a failed scheme that got firmly rejected by the electorate. This was their landmark policy, Stop the Boats, Rwanda. It was rejected firmly. Does the Minister agree with me that the first sign of insanity is trying the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Rupert Lowe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the Home Office annual report, it is confirmed that for 2022-3, £3 billion was spent on hotel costs for illegal migrants, averaging £8 million a day. The cruel inheritance tax assault on British family farms and businesses is estimated to eventually raise £520 million per year. Does this Labour government need to urgently rethink its spending priorities?
No, Mr. Speaker. We've just had a budget that we're in the middle of debating and voting on, and I expect that that will be the way we go forwards.
Melanie Ong.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. The 23% increase in returns of people who have no right to be here is a really positive step in giving the public confidence in our systems. Can I ask the Minister what measures are in place to continue to ensure that our processes remain robust and that the trajectory of returns continues?
Well, we are ensuring that the enforcement part of the Home Office that deals with returns is given the resources it needs to do that job. But in order to make it even more successful, we have to engage with those countries where we wish to return people so that we can have papers issued. And again, the significant shift in international cooperation is what will deliver that.
If Rwanda was a gimmick, why are Germany, Austria, Bulgaria, Cyprus, the Netherlands, Poland and Romania looking at similar schemes? And given the number of crossings and deaths in the Channel, would it not, with hindsight, have been wise to at least allow the Rwanda scheme a trial run?
They aren't considering a Rwanda scheme, Mr. Speaker. They are all saying that they are going to stay within the confines of international law. The Rwanda scheme definitely tore up international law, and it was planned to spend nearly £10 billion up until 2027 on trying to remove 250 people a week from this country and spending nearly £3 billion on extra detention camps for them in this country. I don't think that represents British values or good value for money.
Lawrence Stern.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Given that only 3% of people who arrived by small boat between 2018 and June 2024 have been returned, a period of reflection from the Conservative Party on this issue would be welcome. Does she agree that the government that dispenses with gimmicks and focuses on the day job is delivering that progress on returns?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, but don't underestimate the fact that under the Illegal Migration Act, nobody who arrived in that way could be processed. So there are 118,000 people waiting to be processed because they stopped the system dead. We have to get the system going and process going again, which is what we are doing, so we can get the flow of decisions, return those who aren't entitled to be here, and integrate those who are.
So, Julian Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government has a mandate for trying out its approach, and I wish it well. Personally, I've always felt that unless the boats are intercepted and turned back near the start of their journey, nothing will deter the people from using that method. But can the Minister, who I respect greatly, explain to us how it's possible to smash gangs that operate in other jurisdictions once they get to the point where they withdraw their headquarters to countries where there is no possibility of cooperation with the authorities in charge of those states?
Well, getting to that level of withdrawal would be a fantastic development, which would put incredible pressure on a lot of the supply lines that are currently being used. So if we could get to that stage, I think we would already have made significant progress. And the answer to what the Right Honourable Gentleman is talking about is international cooperation to put the maximum pressure on this internationally terrible trade in human lives and exploitation. And I'm glad that he's giving me a little bit of time to prove that we can make a difference.
Sarah Coombs.
Mr. Speaker, people in West Brom are appalled by these criminal smuggling gangs. Does the Minister agree with me that the last government wasted £700 million on the totally failed Rwanda scheme? And could she set out how this new government is going to fix the situation?
Wasted.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, and it's the repurposing of some of that money and resource which hasn't been lost, which is funding the new approach.
Shoka Kadam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the Minister agree with me that the loss of life is colossally too high on this channel crossings, including the loss of a 2-year-old child just the other week? Would the Minister agree with me that we should reopen safe routes so we can treat those that are coming to this country with dignity and respect that they deserve?
Mr. Speaker, I don't believe that safe routes would stop people attempting to come over the channel in small boats. So I have some sympathy with the idea of safe routes, but I don't think it would stop this trade. For example, 1,500 Indians came across, and we have a visa regime with the Indians. The highest nationality for small boat arrivals this year is the Vietnamese. Again, this is not about people who are always asylum seekers coming over. It's people who wouldn't have a right to be here but are paying to come here. So safe routes does not solve that problem.
Mark Ferguson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Shadow Home Secretary in their remarks earlier referred to the lives lost in the Channel, every single one of them a tragedy. But does the Minister agree with me that, as the Shadow Home Secretary appeared to do, trying to make a political point about those deaths, is frankly beneath the party opposite, as were gimmicks like the Rwanda scheme?
Yes, I agree. Obviously, the loss of life in the Channel this year has been the highest on record, and that is because more pressure is being put on the gangs, the boats are being overloaded, there's more anarchy on the beaches in France, and those are all things that we have to try to deal with in cooperation with our French colleagues.
My constituents want to see an end to the small boat crossings and also an end to the use of hotels for asylum seekers, something that was pledged in the government's manifesto. I'd like to ask the Minister, where hotels have seen asylum seekers moved out, will she undertake to ensure that more are not put back in?
Mr. Speaker, the issue with hotels and other dispersed accommodation is that we've inherited a backlog because of the way that the party opposite ran the system. There was no processing done of asylum seekers who then had to be put up in hotels. Hotels are a temporary, not a solution that's not something we want to deal with, and we will do our best to get out of hotels as quickly as possible by getting the system up and running, processing those who are making claims so that we can get them either approved and integrated or returned.
Alex Barringer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When the government came to power earlier this year, it was the worst year on record for small boats crossings, 6% higher than the last year on record. In 2022. This was a legacy of chaos left by the last government. While there is no room for complacency, will the Minister agree with me that we should be welcoming a 20% lower level of small boats crossings this year as compared to 2022?
I agree that the first 6 months of this year were the worst on record. There was then a quiet 3 months, and now there's been a huge increase, not least because of benign weather conditions. So I don't want to be getting into monthly figures. I think what we've got to do is bear down on the organised criminality that is perpetrating this trade so that we can disrupt it and deal with it that way.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Minister recognise there's a distinct lack of humanity about this whole debate and the discussion surrounding small boats and migration? Does she not recognise that those people that risk all to get into those very dangerous boats and cross the Channel are doing so out of an act of desperation? And by the lack of a safe route system across Europe, it's created a market for people traffickers. Doesn't she think it's necessary, instead of this approach, to actually look seriously at having safe routes for asylum seekers, which will avoid the tragedy of all these deaths in the Channel and, for that matter, in the Mediterranean?
I said earlier, Mr. Speaker, that safe routes wouldn't stop all the Channel crossings. There's now an industrialised system run by organised immigration criminals dealing with this. The Vietnamese would never have a safe route into the UK. There's no visa system, and yet they are now 20% of the people crossing on small boats. So I don't think, with all due respect to the right honourable gentleman, that safe routes would solve the problem.
Jessica Tell.
Mr. Speaker, the last government was responsible for an asylum backlog so large that they ended up spending millions of pounds of taxpayers' money every day on asylum hotels, including in my constituency in Bournemouth West. As the Minister has said, we are now dealing with that legacy. And can I welcome her statement, and does she agree with me
that we'll take no lessons from the party opposite and will continue to make progress towards our manifesto commitments to bring down the backlog and end hotel use.
Mr. Speaker, I couldn't have put it better myself.
Gregory Stafford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think there's unanimity around the House that this is a moral issue. When I raised the issue of deterrent with the Home Secretary on the 22nd of July, the last statement, she seemed to agree with me that we needed to have a deterrent. Since then, the government doesn't seem to have brought forward any specific deterrents. So will she look at, if not the Rwanda scheme, the schemes that other European nations are looking at to see if we can deter the small boats crossings?
Excellent question.
The way to deter the small boats crossings, Mr. Speaker, is to deal with those who are organising and profiting from this immoral trade, and that is what we are doing.
Colin Naismith.
Mr. Speaker, the Shadow Home Secretary and the benches opposite are still banging the drum for the failed Rwanda gimmick. Does the Minister agree with me that if the previous government were so confident that that policy was going to work, they would not have called an election before that theory could be put to the test?
I think my honourable friend makes an intriguing point, since the party opposite have said repeated times from the benches over there that they were just about to start it the week after the election, then all of a sudden it was all going to work and be perfect. After 83,500 people crossed the small boats knowing the Rwanda scheme was legislated for and in place, I suspect somehow that the date of the election might have had a bit to do with the fact that they realised the Rwanda scheme was going to fail.
Lee Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister is claiming credit for an increase in deportations of people who have no right to be in this country. So I want an exact or an approximate figure, please, Mr. Speaker, of how many of these 9,400 people have been sent back since the Labour government come in have actually arrived here on small boats since 2018.
Mr. Speaker, since the party opposite processed virtually nobody who came over on a small boat, they're still in the asylum backlog system that we're attempting to deal with.
Laura Kirksmith.
I'm pleased to see this government taking swift action to tackle the small boats crisis, including scrapping the Rwanda scheme, which was not only ludicrously expensive, but inhumane and ineffective. Can the Minister confirm that it is possible to manage our borders in a way that is both effective and humane, and that we will do that?
Mr. Speaker, that is certainly the balance that this government is aiming to achieve.
Sir Ashley Fox.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister has said that her policy to smash the criminal gangs will reduce the number of migrants crossing the Channel. Can she give the House her estimation of when that policy will start to work?
Mr. Speaker, I said in answer to an earlier question that there are no magic wands in this area, that it's hard, tough, operational processing and cooperation internationally that will begin to bear down on this. It's work by the National Crime Agency, it's work by prosecutorial authorities, often cross borders in different jurisdictions. So the fact that we've made such a good start in terms of international cooperation and the significant shift in attention here will bear down on this. But I'm not going to stand at this dispatch box and pretend that there's an easy time frame or an easy answer as to when this will have the effect that we all want it to have. But we will bear down on it and we will make progress.
Steve Young.
Mr. Speaker, at a time of highly stretched resources right across government, thanks to the mess in public finances that were left by the party opposite, I know that my constituents will be pleased that 75 million has been secured for further investment in Border Security Command. Does the Minister agree with me that it's a far better use of taxpayers' money than paying people to go to Rwanda or housing them in hotels at great expense?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, it's advisable to try to deal with the causes of a problem, the immediate causes being organised immigration, criminality, as well as bearing down on the longer-term causes, which are often about political stability in other areas of the world.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Minister very much for her answers to the questions. I want to take a a slightly different look. And I welcome the fact that smugglers will now be treated using terrorism powers, as it is my firm belief, and the belief of this House, I believe, that the continued abuse of the asylum system is tantamount to invasion. Can the Minister assure us that those who come across the Northern Ireland border will have the same application of power under the terrorism provisions? Thank you so much.
There will be a border security bill coming forward, and perhaps the honourable gentleman would want to serve on the committee so that he can make certain that the points he's just made are accurately reflected by the government in that bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One of the most colossal failures we saw under the previous government was the chaos in the Channel and the associated backlog in the system. And yet they seem to have come here today to tell the British people that they had it all under control. I wonder if the Minister can reassure my constituents of the serious steps she is taking to disrupt the gangs, speed up returns and end this chaos.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, his constituents can be assured that there is a great deal of work going on, more resources being applied, there's a lot more intelligence being gathered, much of which can't be discussed publicly. We are on it, Mr. Speaker.
Kevin McKenna.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I strongly welcome the government's focus on tackling the root causes of organised crime behind these small boats, rather than the gimmicks of the previous government. Across Kent, these criminal gangs are fuelling a rise in organised crime, and in my constituency of Sittingbourne and Sheppey, it's pushing up rural crime, street crime, antisocial behaviour. Can I ask my honourable friend, the Minister, to ensure that the new Border Security Command works closely with Kent Police to actually make sure that the effect across the whole of Kent and, of course, the wider country is dealt with?
I can give my honourable friend that assurance. There are particular areas have suffered particular pressure from this phenomenon over the years, and Kent is obviously one of those, so I'm acutely aware of the pressure that he and the local authorities in the area are under.
Robertson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Over the last 14 years, the party opposite saw this become an increasingly growing crisis. They've spoken much today about how we need a deterrent. Does the Minister agree with me, though, that for somebody who's willing to get into a very questionably seaworthy vessel and cross one of the busiest shipping lanes on the planet, that a 3% chance of a trip to Kigali is not a deterrent? And in fact, the only way of getting a handle on this and dealing with this is to get back to where the problem originates. Waiting for people to get to the Channel is delaying a response and is creating the crisis that they oversaw.
Mr. Speaker, I agree very much with the observations that my honourable friend has made, and so do the figures. 83,500 people came across in small boats during the date when the Rwanda scheme was announced and the date of the last general election. The honourable gentleman says it hadn't started, but they began by saying Rwanda would be a deterrent just when it was published as a bill. And then every time it made no difference, they took it back and said, oh, it will work, it will work. It never would have worked. It cost £700 million, and they had budgeted, but not budgeted, for nearly £10 billion of expenditure by the end of that scheme.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given that at the end of 2022, under the last Conservative government, the asylum backlog had reached 166,261, an 11-fold increase in 12 years, does my honourable friend agree with me that honourable and right honourable members opposite, who are very small in number for their own urgent question, are exhibiting a high degree of audacity?
They are, Mr. Speaker, and perhaps they should also be reminded that returns collapsed on their watch as well.
Right, so that completes the urgent question. Let the front benches change round. Before I call on Member for Ashfield to make his personal statement, I remind the House that such statements should be heard in silence and without interruption. I call Lee Anderson.
Mr. Speaker, with permission,